Organized crime tore through the suburbs of Chicago, leaving violence and corruption in its wake. Prominent officials were seduced by greed and power, doing whatever was necessary to protect their interests. Everyone was on the take.
FBI search
It would
warrant!
fall on the FBI to weed out the corruption and to find the killer of an innocent woman.
Willow Springs, Illinois seemed like any other quiet Midwestern community, but it was really one of the most corrupt places in the nation. This tiny village nestled just outside of Chicago was in the hip pocket of organized crime. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. It was only a matter of time before corruption led to assassination and conspiracy. To end it required a federal sting operation of astounding complexity.
The bank of a sanitary canal in a remote industrial area became the site of a gruesome crime. The killers were quick and thorough. Nearby, 2 police officers were out on night patrol. When they heard the shots fired, they became alarmed. One of the officers drove towards the canal to investigate. He found nothing as he searched the desolate area.
Hey, Chief.
Also on the scene was Willow Springs, Illinois Police Chief Michael
I heard
Corbett.
it earlier myself, and I've already checked the area, so it's
He too saw nothing.
I got it covered. See you later.
The following day, a prominent local attorney called police to report that his wife was missing.
Well, Mr. Masters, we'd like to ask a few questions about your wife.
Lieutenant
I'll certainly
Howard
cooperate
Vanek
any
of
way
the
I
Cook
can.
County Sheriff's Department and his partner
By all means, have a
responded
seat.
to the call. Attorney Alan Masters said that his wife Diane had been out the night before with colleagues and friends from a local college where she worked.
After the meeting, some of the board members would go to a bar. Maybe.
She never came home. There was no sign of her yellow
What time does
Cadillac.
the meeting usually start?
I believe it
He
starts
said he made
around
calls
7
trying to
o'clock.
locate her
She was
until
the same
2 in the
one,
morning,
I honestly don't
but
know
finally
the
gave
name,
up.
You know where it's located?
For the
I
officers,
suppose
the information offered little insight.
board member. Excuse me a minute. Ask some questions about Diane.
Lieutenant James Keating of the Cook County Sheriff's Department joined the officers.
Yeah, by all means, you can sit down.
Sir, we were just asking Mr. Masters questions about his wife's disappearance.
He asked Masters if he could have a look around the
Be
house.
happy to. Sure. Yeah, by all
Masters
means.
agreed.
No, not at all.
He had nothing to hide.
Have a seat.
The officers continued their questioning.
Anything else you can tell us?
As far as I
Reluctantly,
know,
Masters
she
offered
maybe
some
with her
new
lover, some
information.
professor, somebody works for the college.
He suspected that his wife Diane had been having an affair.
I have no idea
Maybe
who
the
he
two
is.
lovers
No,
had
I
run
don't-
off together.
I don't know who he is or what he looks like. I just have my suspicions.
Excuse me, guys, I think we need to wrap this up.
Lieutenant Vanek wanted to investigate further and look around the house himself.
Sir, I think we need to take another look around in here.
Husbands are always suspects when their wives
I look around.
disappear.
There's nothing
Sir,
here.
we need to look around.
It's time to
Something's
go.
missing here,
Let's
sir.
go now.
But Lieutenant Keating intervened. He
Sir,
wouldn't
procedure
allow
is
it.
2 investigators always check out the scene.
In his
I
mind,
think it's
everything
time
had
to
checked
go.
out.
Now. Let's
Sir.
go now.
Vanek was upset. He didn't know why Keating would undermine his investigation. Outside, Keating confronted Lieutenant Vanek, telling him to back off.
No
As far as he was concerned, Masters was not a suspect. But Vanek didn't buy it, and he let Keating know. Just as the two men were about to explode, Willow Springs Police Chief Michael Corbett arrived at the scene.
Look, easy. Come on, guys. Supposed to be on the same side. Come on, man.
Keating would have the final word.
Vanek, you're off the case. Forget it. You're off the case, man. You got that?
The question still remained, where was Diane Masters? Her disappearance grabbed the media's attention.
And Diane, if you would, please come to
She had been very active in the local community. Diane had worked hard to help open a shelter for battered women. She was also involved in local politics and sat on the board of the Moraine Valley Community
also, would like to
College.
present Diane with this plaque to show
She
her
did
how
not
much we
appear to
thank
have
her
any
for all
enemies.
the hard work and her dedication in opening this crisis center, something that is needed desperately in this community.
But investigators began uncovering other details. It was reported by Diane's friends that her husband was controlling and abusive, and that Diane was planning to file for divorce. Assistant U.S. Attorney Tom Scorza followed the case.
We were pretty certain that what had happened here was that Diane and Alan had a regular marital dispute, sort of ordinary dispute, but that it had escalated into something much worse.
Go ahead and send him in.
Scorza's investigation soon revealed that Alan Masters was more than just a bad husband. It was rumored that Alan Masters had bribed local officials and police officers to secure favorable outcomes for his clients.
How'd it go?
Very well. Very well. Nothing to worry
This
about at
corruption
all.
extended right to the top of law enforcement. Allegedly, Masters frequently enlisted the help of Chief Corbett.
If I don't hear about this anymore, it'll be worth every penny.
It was also rumored that Masters and Chief Corbett were involved in safeguarding some of the Chicago mob's betting and prostitution rings, which were run out of show clubs throughout suburban Cook County. But investigators were focused only on Diane's disappearance. With no evidence and few leads, that investigation stalled. Unaware of Alan Masters or his wife's disappearance, the FBI had already begun an independent investigation into the mob-controlled rackets of the Chicago area. U.S. Attorney David Stetler worked with the FBI to help unravel the prostitution operation.
At that time, there were a number of topless, bottomless joints that one could go to, and many of them were undercover fronts for prostitution. So you could go in, you could watch the naked girls dancing on the stage, and for a price, you could retreat to the back, either to a booth or a back room, and engage in one form of sexual activity or another with the dancers.
The club owners knew that their customers would spend more on drinks and prostitutes if they could use their credit cards. But the patrons were reluctant. They did not want bills arriving at their homes or businesses with charges incurred from nightclubs with seedy names. The club owners found credit card transaction companies that were willing to process the charges using false but respectable business names. Special Agent Ivan Harris of the FBI's Chicago field office was assigned to help bring down the illegal businesses.
The scam was using various companies in order to launder credit cards through their business to make it appear that businessmen were actually eating at a restaurant or using a limousine service to incur the charges when in fact they were charges for prostitution.
Larry Wright was one of the credit card transaction company owners. Wright would pick up the week's transactions from the clubs and process them through his company, National Credit Service, or NCS.
really working well.
One of his clients was a club owner named Joseph Marin, whose club was a front for a mob-controlled prostitution house. Wright wanted to expand his own operations. He approached Marin about setting up an illegal betting club.
Yeah, she's nice. You had a chance to really interview her.
Marin was willing to help out the man who made him money.
Yeah, she's still here. She answers to the group.
Wright would first need to pay protection money to local police in order not to be exposed and arrested.
You feel pretty confident though?
Marin was the man who could arrange that protection. Wright was more than willing to pay.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, he's a really good guy.
Marin arranged the meeting at the Willow Springs Police Department.
I trust him completely.
It was to take place with Police Chief Michael Corbett. It was believed that Corbett had been handpicked by the Chicago mob boss to oversee and protect their interests in and around Willow Springs.
The word on the street, of course, was that no one could do anything in Willow Springs without the permission of the Chief of Police, Mike Corbett. The message also was, from virtually anyone you would talk to, that he was so powerful, that he was so well connected, that nothing could ever be done about him.
I just want to make sure I don't get any unexpected visits.
Corbett agreed to help Larry Wright set up the new betting operation for a price.
Not quite yet.
In return, Corbett assured him he wouldn't get any heat from his officers.
All right.
Larry Wright was well on his way. He returned to his office at National Credit Service, operated out of a nondescript office park location. Wright worked with two other staff members.
Doing great. Larry, great.
But these were not ordinary employees. NCS was not just a credit card transaction service for illegal activities. It was a front for the FBI. Larry Wright was actually undercover Special Agent Larry Damron. And he and the FBI were using NCS to work their way into the heart of the corruption in Willow Springs. While local investigators struggled to unravel the disappearance of a prominent attorney's wife, the FBI had set up an undercover operation in the town of Willow Springs, just outside of Chicago. Their target, organized crime, and the corrupt police who protected them from prosecution. The undercover work was often painstaking and frustrating. FBI Special Agent Larry Damron explains the difficulties inherent in undercover work.
During the course of the undercover operation, you try to immerse yourself in what you're doing, and you try to assume that role because it's necessary for you to do that in order to accomplish anything. Oftentimes you'll hear people make comments, or you'll see people do things that in any other circumstance they would be arrested for immediately. And so what you have to remember is you're in a role and you play that role out.
Damron had heard stories about how the mob resolved problems. They were swift and violent, and their signature was unmistakable. 2 bullets in the head. There was no room for mistakes. Victor Spilatro, a player in Chicago's organized crime, approached Damron at NCS. Though Victor himself wielded little power, his brothers held tremendous influence within the mob's hierarchy. Damron was starting to move into the center of the violent Chicago underworld.
The Spilatros were one of the best-known names of mobsters in Chicago. The older brother, Tony, was the boss in Las Vegas. He represented the Chicago outfit for their interests in Las Vegas. Had been a prominent figure and had been widely mentioned in the papers, having been involved in murders and extortions and things like that.
Agent Damron quickly developed a reputation as an effective businessman in laundering money for mob operations.
Well, we got everything back here that you need. All right, you come on back.
Sure everything's all right?
Spilatro knew of NCS's activities with the local nightclubs. They were under his control.
Really appreciate what you're doing for us.
Good, everything's going good with the business?
Yes, it's going great.
That's great. Good.
He told Damron he would have to pay him a cut to stay in business.
I'm glad you appreciate what we do for you. Okay, well that's really good.
Damron had no objection.
The level that we had there is we were paying protection to a fairly important aspect of the mob, the Spilatro family. And so that gave us a little bit of status, if you will. But we had absolutely no authority or anything like that in the mob. We were just workers, and our value was we made them money.
Agent Damron traveled to a remote hotel where he met with FBI Special Agent Gordon Brooks, who oversaw the undercover operation. To ensure that Damron's real identity was not compromised, the two met infrequently to exchange information. Brooks vigilantly kept tabs on Damron. The investigation was as dangerous as it was complex.
Not to worry about things.
The agent cautiously moved forward. He wanted to continue expanding the FBI's undercover operations. He used every opportunity he could to sell the idea of opening more betting and prostitution houses throughout suburban Chicago. Even with a go-ahead from the Spilatros, Damron would still need permission and protection from the police.
The future.
He met with nightclub owner Joseph Marin to hash out the details of the new clubs and secure police protection.
Larry, how you doing?
But there was a problem.
Look, I got some upsetting news.
What's up?
Their protector, Chief Corbett, had been removed by the Willow Springs City Council under suspicion of corruption. Marin knew another high-ranking law enforcement official who could provide the same protection as Corbett. Lieutenant James Keating, Cook County's Vice Squad Supervisor.
Tell you what, he deals with me.
U.S. Attorney Tom Scorza was not surprised by the development. Keating's reputation was well known.
Okay, you feel pretty confident about this guy?
Jim Keating was a lieutenant in the Cook County Sheriff's Police Department, but if anything, the rank understated his influence. He was a very well-connected officer in a very corrupt department. He had connections with people of higher rank who were also corrupt, and so he was a key figure.
With Corbett out of the picture, the FBI shifted their focus to Keating. Damron met with him at a restaurant outside of Willow Springs.
It allows me to really concentrate on my job.
Keating said he'd have no problem helping Damron expand his operations.
One thing we need to understand is if there's a situation that comes up.
But any move Damron made would have to be approved by him.
I make the decision when something goes down.
He warned Damron to play it straight with him and his people.
He told us that the one thing that he wouldn't tolerate was if someone double-crossed him. And he said if that happened, that they'd find us with our legs on one of the streets in the area and our head on another street in the area.
As instructed by the FBI, Damron proposed another operation. A club that would be a front for prostitution.
You want to hold on to this?
He gave the lieutenant the first of many payments to ensure police protection.
Looks like a bonus for the guys, huh?
Before he left, Keating said he knew someone who might be able to help him. A lawyer named Alan Masters. Though he had no direct dealings with Alan Masters, Damron had heard the name mentioned by Chief Corbett.
Well, I knew that Masters was a well-known attorney on the south side of Chicago, that he had a tremendous reputation for being able to get things done, particularly in the local court system, and the scuttlebutt was that he wasn't reluctant to pay bribes or to deal with people however he needed to.
Damron continued his meetings with his case supervisor, Special Agent Gordon Brooks. Damron needed to know everything he could about Alan Masters and his relationship with Keating and Corbett.
Now, you're in with Corbett. He's dirty.
The FBI and U.S. attorneys quickly established a hierarchy within this ring of corruption.
Okay, you're making your way up to Keating? Right. I want you to...
Corbett was the king in Willow Springs, but anytime he had to do something that involved the broader Cook County, he needed to get the permission of Keating. And Keating always had to check with the ultimate fixer, Alan Masters, to make sure everything could be handled at the court level.
I can maybe get Masters interested.
As the extent of Alan Masters' criminal activity became clearer, the FBI began looking closer at his possible role in his wife's disappearance. The two distinct cases were beginning to overlap, and Damron's objectives were broadening.
Authorities call 3 counties still.
He was a suspect in the disappearance of his wife. It was thought that if we could develop a relationship with him, there might be something there that would come to light and might be of some benefit to that investigation.
Damron learned that Alan Masters allegedly made payoffs to several area judges in exchange for favorable decisions.
Now, we need to have that hearing on the Sanderson case. It needs to go our way. Do we have an understanding of that, Judge?
Agents speculated that Diane might have witnessed her husband's illegal activity and threatened to expose him.
I think we can come to terms with that. Right this way, sir.
Now trying to elicit information about Diane's disappearance, Damron continued his efforts to make inroads into the corruption around Willow Springs. He met with Keating several weeks later to follow up on his plan to open a show club.
A good manager lined up.
Oh, I've got
Again, Keating mentioned that his friend Alan Masters could help.
Can take care of that. He's a real fixer.
Damron took the opportunity to bring up Alan's wife. Keating said little, but then added an unusual comment.
The same plan we had with the other one.
Probably heard him. Seen him.
We talked about Masters' wife turning up missing, and Keating said, well, she turned up missing like the day before the divorce was going to be filed.
That was convenient, wasn't it?
It was convenient.
And chuckled about what a good circumstance that was.
Damron was cautious not to probe too far, fearing that Keating might grow suspicious.
You've known this fella for a long time?
Yeah,
I've known him for a while. I've worked with him before.
Sure, he can do.
As the meeting ended, Keating handed over Alan Masters' phone number, saying the lawyer was expecting his
You
call.
won't be implicated.
I just need to make sure lined up. I'm going with the same.
He proceeded to set up the meeting with Alan Masters.
Hello?
Mr. Masters, how are you? This is Larry Wright speaking.
The attorney agreed to help push through all the necessary permits and legal documents, which meant bribing officials and securing protection.
Yeah, we've been working pretty hard on it for a while now.
Well, someone I think it'd be a pretty
Masters
good
suggested
location
they get
for what you're
together.
talking about.
The meeting was set for the following week, Monday, December 13th.
Okay, I'll look forward to meeting you then. I think we can maybe do some business.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
Before the meeting would take place, however, a police officer on routine patrol near the sanitary canal area in Willow Springs noticed something unusual. Tire tracks led directly into the canal. He immediately called for assistance. Little did he know that the lid was about to come off the underworld in Willow Springs.
Find these trucks out here and mark.
While the FBI continued their undercover operation in the Chicago suburb of Willow Springs, an officer out on routine patrol made an alarming discovery. Tire tracks leading directly into the sanitary canal. Police officers and a dive team responded to the site. Overseeing the investigation was James Ross, an honest cop appointed by City Council to replace Michael Corbett as the police chief in Willow Springs. Though Corbett had been ousted from the department, his legacy of corruption remained. Below the surface, divers found a virtual underwater parking lot. 82 cars lined the bottom of the polluted canal. U.S. Attorney Tom Scorza believed he knew why the cars were there, and who could make a profit by allowing them to be dumped without a police investigation.
Those are known as insurance give-ups, people who want to collect money on their car when the car is not worth very much anymore will find a way of losing the car and then reporting it stolen and collecting insurance. My belief was that Corbett had been the approver of all of the dumping of the cars in the Willow Springs Canal.
By nighttime, a third car had been dredged up, a yellow Cadillac. The license plate on the vehicle, DGM-19, was well known in Willow Springs. It was the tag registered to Diane Masters. Lieutenant Keating of the Cook County Sheriff's Department arrived at the scene. Chief Ross was surprised that Keating, a vice cop, had been notified. He asked Keating why he was there. Keating had no response. Officers continued examining the Cadillac. When they pried open the trunk, they discovered a decomposed body. Ross immediately ordered that the car and the body be taken back to a city garage where they could be thoroughly examined for clues. The decision not to use the police garage was well reasoned. Chief Ross knew this case potentially had far-reaching implications, and he couldn't trust his own officers. The fewer people nosing around, the better. State police began to scour the car and the body for evidence. They found .22 caliber shell casings in the trunk. The keys were still in the ignition. Eerily, the watch on the deceased body and the dashboard clock had stopped at exactly the same time, 1:50. They removed the body for further forensic investigation. The forensic team examining the body found the skull had been crushed. They also discovered 2 bullet hole entries in the left cheekbone. The bullet fragments inside the skull were removed and sent off to the FBI lab for ballistic evaluation. Dental records confirmed what everyone believed. The body found in the trunk was Diane Masters. The 9-month investigation into Diane's disappearance was now a homicide investigation.
Come on in.
Chief Ross called in Cook County Detective John Reed to work the homicide. He was to team up with the FBI, who was now taking over the murder investigation. Detective Reed was not to trust even his closest friends in the department. He was told that through the FBI undercover operation run out of NCS, law enforcement officers were being investigated for corruption. And some had ties to Alan Masters, who was now a firm suspect in Diane's murder. As Agent Harris and Detective Reed initiated their murder investigation, Agent Damron continued his undercover operation.
Today to set up a time and place for our meeting.
He called Alan Masters to confirm their meeting to set up the show club.
I'm jammed. I expect to be in court all day tomorrow. I'm sorry.
Well,
Masters was evasive and
next
seemed
week's
distracted.
Okay too, if that's okay with you.
Maybe we can work something out then. Just give me some time.
He canceled the meeting.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Wright.
Damron immediately called Keating. With the conversation being recorded by the FBI, he hoped Keating would explain why Masters was being evasive.
No, I was wondering if you had any information on that. As I said, he's pretty busy. How about if you give me a call in 3 or 4 weeks?
But Keating was cryptic.
Maybe we can work something out then.
He instructed Damron not to bother Masters. He had too many problems to deal with.
Okay, bye.
new show club would have to wait.
What do you got for me? Here are the transcripts.
Damron met with Agent Brooks. Masters and Keating both appeared nervous since Diane's body had been discovered. But that was hardly enough evidence to prosecute either of them for murder. Perhaps Damron had overlooked something. He handed over his tape-recorded conversations with Keating.
This is gonna nail him. We're gonna get him.
Can you play that again, please?
Over the next several months, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Cook County Sheriff's Department, and the FBI began the process of merging the various investigations.
All right. Well,
The link between them was Alan Masters, Cook County Lieutenant James Keating, and former Willow Springs Police Chief Michael Corbett.
If that's the case, if we can
It would fall on prosecutors to begin constructing a case proving that the three men and all of their activities represented an ongoing, organized criminal enterprise.
We can get the RICO prosecution happening.
And what we had to do in order to prosecute Masters and Corbett and Keating for a collection of their activities, including the homicide, we had to show that they made up a criminal organization, a mini-mafia.
Appreciate you meeting with us tonight, Mrs. Capstaff.
Well, if you guys don't
Detective Reed and Agent Harris's first step was to question Diane's friends who had been with her on the night she disappeared.
Okay.
You said that you followed her home that night.
One of Diane's colleagues, Genevieve Capstaff, had actually followed Diane home that evening after a board meeting.
And so I just wanted to see, so I followed her.
Capstaff claimed everyone on the Moraine Community College Board who worked with Diane suspected that she was having an affair with an economics professor. She admitted that she wanted to see if the two were going to rendezvous. She followed Diane to her street. When Diane turned to go home, Capstaff continued on.
Is there anything else that you can tell
Further
me that
questioning
might-
revealed that all of the community college board members, including Diane, were given a $100,000 life insurance policy as part of their employment benefits.
$100,000.
Right, yes, but that only covers...
The policy specifically stated that proceeds would be paid if a board member died while traveling to and from board meetings. The policy was void when the board member entered their home.
That's all, but...
We appreciate your
Alan Masters claimed Diane never arrived home that night. He was therefore eligible to collect the insurance money. Several months before Diane's body was discovered in the trunk of her car, Masters filed a claim with the insurance company. After filling out all the paperwork, he sent it off. Though Diane's fate at that time was unclear, Masters had a judge declare her legally dead. As a result, he was about to receive $100,000. Alan Masters was fast becoming the FBI's prime suspect in the murder of his wife, Diane. Shortly after her body was discovered, investigators learned that he had filed a claim with his wife's insurance company. Within a few months, 2 checks appeared in the amount of $50,000 each. If federal agents and prosecutors could prove Masters was responsible for his wife's death and that he profited from it, it would be one more element that showed that he and his accomplices were involved in an ongoing criminal enterprise. Homicide in a federal racketeering case carries much more jail time than a state charge. As the investigation began to take on a clearer focus, FBI agents working the undercover case received bad news.
Listen, we're gonna have to move rather quickly on this.
The Washington Post had gotten word of the operation.
Listen, we're having a bit of a problem.
We're almost at the point where we can really make some impact.
The Post gave the FBI 3 weeks to wrap it up before running the story.
We have some have to be closed down. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that.
All 16.
Agents had no choice but to quickly bring their undercover operations to a close.
Here, so please do me a favor.
For U.S. Attorney David Stetler, the timing couldn't have been better.
The project had run its course, and the bulk of the information anybody was ever going to get had been retrieved, and to make the operation go on longer would have resulted in additional evidence, but it also would have resulted in the evidence that had been gathered becoming more and more stale.
Agents had meticulously pieced together the web of corruption that extended to the nightclubs under mob control. Now it was time to shut them down.
Yo, FBI, open the door. Open the door.
The FBI hit all of the clubs on the same night with massive force. Several hundred officers and agents raided over a dozen clubs throughout Cook County, including those in Willow Springs.
Stay right here. Go on in, fellas. Stay right here.
Sit tight.
We haven't done anything.
All right, hands behind your back.
Ain't helping anything. Shut up.
Inside the clubs, federal agents were able to collect volumes of incriminating evidence. "55 people were indicted, including club owner Joseph Marin, Tony Spilatro, and his brother Victor. They were prosecuted in both the state and federal courts for extortion, prostitution, bribery, and racketeering. Several deputies from the Cook County Sheriff's Department and officers from the Willow Springs Police Department were also indicted and convicted for protecting these businesses. After 3 years of undercover work, the sting operation was now officially closed.
What's your friend's name?
For undercover Special Agent Larry Damron, it was finally time to leave the role of Larry Wright.
I would say the finish was elation and disappointment at the same time. Disappointment that there were so many opportunities out there to identify other criminal activity. We knew that that it was a good job, that we had gathered tremendous amounts of evidence, and that we had a real insight into some of the criminal activity that was taking place that we hadn't had before.
Alan Masters.
Local authorities, the FBI, and prosecutors could now focus exclusively on the Diane Masters murder investigation.
She said he hit her.
They continued questioning her friends and associates, including the man with whom she was allegedly having an affair.
There were other things that happened.
Economics professor Jim Koselniak. He confirmed that he and Diane had a relationship. He also claimed that Masters had abused Diane physically, mentally, and emotionally. She lived in fear of her husband. Diane had told him she planned to file for divorce. Koselniak also had reason to fear Alan Masters. One night, Koselniak and Diane had met for drinks at a local bar. He recalled that Diane called home to check on her daughter. Instead of getting the babysitter on the phone, Alan unexpectedly answered.
Alan?
He suspected she was with her lover.
I didn't know you were
He was
in trouble.
irate and began to
I
threaten
was
her.
calling to check on Andra.
He vowed to destroy her. Koselniak said Diane returned from the phone call and was very upset. He went to the bar for more drinks. There, a man suddenly confronted him and began firing off a series of questions.
Yes, I did.
The man never identified himself.
10, 12 years.
What's your name?
He asked Koselniak's name and where he worked.
Koselniak.
Koselniak.
Though the man said little else, Koselniak felt he had just received a threat. Stay away from Diane.
And
Koselniak would later recognize the man as Lieutenant James Keating. He said that on the night of Diane's disappearance, she had called him and warned him not to meet her for drinks.
So this was an unusual move on her part.
They usually got together after her college board meetings.
What was the tone of voice?
Lately, she had been troubled by Alan's behavior.
That they were going to another restaurant.
Selniak took her advice and canceled their plans.
Met at the same place.
He never saw Diane again.
The meeting was always straight to RDG.
As a matter of fact, they're on the way now.
Agent Harris and Detective Reed continued to develop witnesses.
Hey, glad you could come by.
They discovered that Masters had hired a private investigator to keep tabs on Diane.
That his wife Diane.
We subsequently developed a cooperating individual named Ted Nakaza, who was a private investigator with Alan Masters. Masters had requested Ted Nakaza to place a bug on his home telephone number because he suspected his wife Diane was having an affair.
I got a few tapes.
Hey, what do you guys got for me?
Nakaza told investigators the bug was successful in exposing Diane and Koselniak's affair.
Good news.
Ted Nikaza played back a telephone conversation, captured on tape, where Diane was talking in a highly sexual way with the boyfriend, Jim Koselniak. According to Nikaza, after playing the tape, Alan Masters declared his intention to kill Diane and to get Keating to make it look like an accident.
Alan Masters wanted his wife murdered, and he had the resources to get away with it.
You gotta stay cool.
The FBI and local authorities continued to uncover evidence against Alan Masters and his associates that pointed towards a conspiracy to murder Alan's wife, Diane. Through a private investigator hired by Alan Masters, Diane's affair had been exposed.
His wife was cheating.
Alan's rage was out of control.
Yes.
But investigators had no hard evidence to charge him with murder. After an exhaustive 5-year investigation, that was about to change.
He intended to have Diane killed.
They uncovered a Cook County Sheriff's deputy who was willing to talk.
Agent Harris.
Deputy Jack Bachman had startling information.
Keating brought me into his
Bachman
office.
had been too afraid of the consequences of coming forward on his own.
Say any more?
He claimed that he had been approached to kill Diane. The offer had come through Lieutenant James Keating.
Bachman had a series of conversations with Keating, and ultimately Keating asked Bachman if Bachman would be interested in the job of actually stalking and killing Diane Masters.
Bachman said Keating offered him $25,000 to carry out the hit.
And,
Michael Corbett, the chief of police, had already agreed to dispose of the body. Bachman declined the offer.
No, sir, I'm sorry. I can't get involved in anything like that. No, no, sir.
Through Keating, Masters had clearly solicited a murder.
About this meeting we just had, and
Well, no, but he did offer me $25,000.
This was one of the final pieces prosecutor Scorza needed to bring an indictment.
He said he wanted to eliminate her. I said, what do you mean?
What we were able to show is that when Alan Masters decided to kill his wife, he simply was able to turn to the two police officers that he'd already been working with on corrupt activities and criminal activities. And that made the homicide and the planning of it and the solicitation of it, it made it an activity of the criminal enterprise.
The pieces had finally come together.
And Diane Masters.
Investigators put together a likely scenario of Diane Masters' murder.
Said she heard something.
Alan Masters had found a hitman to kill Diane and her boyfriend when they met for the usual drinks after her college board meeting. However, Diane didn't meet with Koselniak that evening.
You're home late tonight.
Meeting ran late.
Furious, Masters took matters into his own hands.
Alan Masters was at home babysitting their young daughter. He was setting up his alibi by making long-distance calls all night to prove that he was home. He never expected his wife to walk in the door. She did. She began the process of getting undressed, and he hit her with a blunt instrument, 2 blows to the head.
Masters then called Chief Corbett, who came with an unknown accomplice to dispose of the body. They dumped Diane's body in the trunk of her Cadillac. Corbett then drove away with the accomplice following him. Masters remained at home with his daughter. They drove to the remote sanitary canal. Diane's watch was reset to throw investigators off the trail should her body ever be found. They then fired 2 shots into her head. They wanted it to look like a mob hit. They also reset the dashboard clock to 1:50. Alan Masters made sure that he was on the phone at the time to corroborate his alibi. Corbett and the accomplice dumped the Cadillac into the canal. In June of 1988, 6 years after Diane's murder, investigators brought charges against the 3 conspirators. Former Police Chief Michael Corbett was the first arrested on federal charges of racketeering, bribery, and conspiracy to solicit and cover up the murder of Diane Masters. Special Agent Ivan Harris tried to elicit a confession.
Mike Corbett subsequently confessed that he was in fact the person that had put Diane Masters' car in the canal. He disavowed any knowledge, knowing that she was in the trunk of the car at that time.
Cook County Lieutenant James Keating was arrested next on the same federal charges. He too denied involvement in Diane's murder. And finally, Alan Masters. In addition to racketeering and bribery, the indictment against Alan Masters charged that he planned, solicited, and aided and abetted the murder of his wife.
If you wish one.
Prosecutors would not have enough hard evidence to charge any of the conspirators with the actual murder of Diane. Prosecutor Tom Scorza was able to successfully tie all of their criminal activities together for the jury. Masters was convicted on all counts. Collecting the $100,000 insurance money after having his wife murdered also made him guilty of mail fraud. He received a total of 40 years, effectively, to the end of his life. Former Chief Michael Corbett received 20 years. James Keating was convicted and sentenced to over 30 years.
The Masters case was special in my experience because there was no one single piece of evidence proving guilt. What there were 1,000 little pieces that made a mosaic. That was made the case intriguing. It made it very difficult to present. It made it a challenge to present to the jury, but it made a terrific story because in the end, the jury could see how one little piece from over here and one little piece from over there made a picture. And the picture was a plot among 3 fellows who had been involved in a lot of criminal activity to do their ultimate criminal act, murder Diane Masters.
Watch yourself.
The undercover investigation that Agent Damron oversaw, and the work of several other FBI agents, exposed a deeply rooted corruption throughout Cook County and brought it to its ultimate demise. By weeding out these pockets of corruption, the people living in the suburbs of Chicago no longer have to live with the lawlessness that threatened to destroy their community. An armored car vanished during a routine stop. Carrying nearly $1 million, it was supposed to be impenetrable. Investigators didn't know if the driver was involved or if he had been ambushed. FBI agents and local detectives began to suspect a group of former law officers in the heist. It would take determination and high technology to track the robbers and make them pay for their silent strike.
Money may not be the root of all evil, but for some men, $1 million is enough to justify murder. Even men sworn to uphold the law can sometimes be tempted. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. When robbery turned to murder, the FBI would discover that a killer might be among them.
The Arrowhead Mall, Glendale, Arizona. November 28, 1994. At 1:30 p.m., a van pulled up outside a department store at the mall. It was an unmarked, fully armored Wells Fargo vehicle. Several companies use these customized vans since they are less conspicuous targets for robbery. Following company protocol, the driver remained inside the van while the courier went to pick up cash from the store. The van was bulletproof, and its doors could not be forced open from the outside. Inside the department store office, the courier exchanged empty bags for those filled with the weekend's receipts. It was the Monday after Thanksgiving. The cash pickup followed the busiest shopping weekend of the year. When the courier returned to the parking lot minutes later, the armored van and the driver were gone. He notified police immediately. The 911 call came to the Glendale, Arizona Police Department. They dispatched units to the scene and sent word to the FBI. The nearest FBI field office is in Phoenix, 20 miles from the mall. Because the money in the van was federally insured, the FBI opened a case. Agents headed out to the scene. Glendale detectives arrived at the mall first. They began interviewing the courier. He said he had been gone only 4 minutes when he discovered the van and his partner, John McGosh, had disappeared. The courier estimated the amount of cash, checks, and coins in the van to be just over $1 million. Detectives interviewed others at the mall. None reported seeing or hearing anything unusual. FBI agents soon arrived from Phoenix. Evidence technicians had processed the area. Where the van had been parked, they found a cigarette butt and a pair of broken eyeglasses. The courier confirmed that his partner was a smoker and said the glasses looked like those McGosh needed when he drove. The technicians collected and marked the items as evidence.
David 44 to David
Detective
41.
Tom Clayton is a senior investigator for the Glendale Police Department.
On the 211. 10-4. Well, I think the first thought when we saw the van missing was the driver took off with the money and was going to leave town. We also considered somebody could have robbed him. With the glasses laying there, we weren't sure if it's, is it a setup or did something really happen? We explored every possibility we could think of.
Supervisory Special Agent Stephen Chenoweth, now retired, was the lead for the FBI. The investigators organized a search for the van and its driver, believing that whoever took the van would abandon it soon in favor of a getaway car. They dispatched some officers to begin a ground search around the mall. Pilots from the Arizona Department of Public Safety conducted an aerial search. The DPS officers began at the mall, then widened their search in concentric circles, looking for the van in the surrounding neighborhoods. Whenever they spotted a white van, they radioed ground units to follow up. Special Agent Chenoweth and the others knew most armored car robberies are inside jobs or armed ambushes. Witnesses hadn't heard shooting. Perhaps the driver had decided to trade his hourly wage for $1 million.
Certainly, the van is supposed to be locked and the driver inside, and therefore inaccessible. The fact that the van is missing would lead us to initially at least think about the possibility of the guard driver being involved.
Investigators sought more information on the missing driver.
We investigated John McGosh. First off, we started running his name in the computer to see if we could find any arrests or if he had a criminal history. We started through the Wells Fargo file, his employment file, looking for relatives, friends, where he lived.
After securing a search warrant, investigators traveled to his apartment. His landlady let them in. The investigators were looking for evidence that McGosh had planned the robbery. The apartment appeared undisturbed. Nothing indicated he had planned the robbery or that he was ready to leave town.
Do you know who this is?
Yes. That's Lisa Johnson.
Detectives learned that McGosh had a daughter living nearby in Phoenix.
Live here? All right. Does she live here?
Determining her address through DMV records, they went to interview her.
Police. Detective Myers, Detective Clayton. Can I talk to you for just a moment?
McGosh's daughter described her father as honest and stable. He took his job seriously. Police found others who said the same. McGosh had no criminal record.
Well, right now, your father and the
Detectives began to consider the 61-year-old grandfather not as a suspect, but as a victim.
John McGosh had a good reputation. We talked to family, friends, relatives, co-workers. He was a person that did not have a lot of requirements in life. Money wasn't a big concern. Based on the background we did on him, we didn't believe he was going to be involved in the crime.
With McGosh eliminated as a suspect, the investigators were back to square one. They needed the public's help.
Certainly when you don't have eyewitnesses, you try and put as much information out in the form of press releases, newspaper articles, things of this nature, in hopes that it would reach somebody that maybe saw something that otherwise had not heard about it.
That afternoon, the FBI and Glendale police held a press conference.
I wanted to give you an update on bank heist outside the mall earlier.
They released photos and descriptions of the missing van and driver.
As of yet, we have very little.
Anyone who had seen John McGosh or the Wells Fargo van was asked to contact the FBI.
Investigation without assistance.
A reward of $60,000 was posted for any tip leading to the recovery of the money. and the conviction of those involved.
Witnesses, anyone who may know where the van is at this point.
Hours later, a 911 call came in from a church in Sun City, Arizona, just outside Glendale. The caller reported a van idling in the church's parking lot. Parishioners arriving for a Monday night bingo game noticed the van, which fit the description in the news reports. License plates and serial numbers confirmed it was the van missing from the mall. Investigators approached cautiously, not knowing who or what was inside. No one was in the driver's seat, but investigators could see the outline of a body on the floor. They tried to open the van, but the armored vehicle was impenetrable, even to the agents.
The engine was going, it was locked, and a cursory examination initially of the inside disclosed the body lying in the center. In order to gain access to the van, of course, we had to call the armored car company.
No one at the church had seen who left the van or what vehicle they used to get away.
Notice anybody else around?
Checking the body through the window, police could see blood on the chest near a Wells Fargo badge. There was no sign of breathing. Authorities believed John Magash had been killed during the robbery. There were no bullet marks on the van's exterior, no broken glass, and no sign of forced entry at the doors. Whoever had hit the van knew what they were doing.
An armored car robbery is a pretty sophisticated crime, and it takes a lot of detailed planning. And so we knew after finding the van and finding the body that we were up against probably some people who had thought this out very well, planned it extensively, and certainly would not stop at murder in carrying this out.
Investigators needed to get inside the van to know what happened. On November 28, 1994, the FBI and Glendale, Arizona police investigated an armored van hijacked from a mall and abandoned in a church parking lot in nearby Sun City. The driver, 61-year-old John Magash, lay dead in the cab. He had been shot once in the head, but his death was not instantaneous. Technicians noted aspirated blood spatter, indicating Magash had continued breathing after being shot. Technicians lifted many latent prints from money cabinets in the van's interior. These would be compared to known prints of employees. No foreign prints were found. No hairs or fibers pointed toward a suspect either. Inside the van, investigators found $132,000 in coins. The cash and checks, estimated at $920,000, were gone. The details of the crime suggested that there had been several violent criminals, according to Special Agent Stephen Chenoweth.
After looking at the van, we knew that we were probably dealing with certainly more than one person, because this would be very difficult for one person to accomplish. So we knew we were looking probably at least two or more. and very vicious and violent people who certainly would not stop at anything in order to obtain their goals, which was the money located inside the van.
To Glendale Detective Tom Clayton, the placement of the van outside Glendale city limits spoke to the criminals' understanding of police procedure.
We believed they dumped the van in Sun City to get it out of our jurisdiction into another one to complicate the investigation and communication of police agencies, maybe hoping we would not be able to link the two things together right away.
During the autopsy of the armored car driver, the medical examiner retrieved several small bullet fragments from the left side of the victim's head. The fragments were too damaged to determine the make of the murder weapon. It seemed like a small caliber, perhaps a .22. The medical examiner found no powder burns on the victim's head. This meant he had been shot from a distance. Magash's partner said the driver often smoked a cigarette while waiting in the van. Though it was against company policy, he usually opened his door to let the smoke out. Investigators believed the killers knew this and shot him when he opened the door. Because of his experience tracking down elusive criminals, now retired FBI Special Agent Ron Myers was transferred from the Fugitive Task Force to work the case. From the beginning, he knew they were not hunting amateurs.
One of the things they did that made us think that they were professionals was the manner in which they did the robbery. They picked an isolated part of the shopping center where not many people parked, where there wouldn't be many witnesses. They drove through the type of neighborhoods where there weren't many people out during the day, and they picked an empty parking lot of a church that had no one at it during the day. Go right in here, sir.
Investigators received dozens of calls to their tip line. One witness came forward, claiming to have some information that might be helpful. He said he had seen a white van quickly leaving the mall at the time in question. A red pickup truck followed not far behind, but he wasn't sure if the two vehicles were together. Investigators were frustrated that no one saw the actual ambush at the mall.
We couldn't find any eyewitnesses. And when you don't really know what happened, or you don't have somebody that can tell you what maybe transpired with the van, it's a mystery.
With no other solid leads, investigators canvassed the neighborhoods between the mall and the church. Perhaps someone there had witnessed something. Edward Morgan, a resident of Sun City, recalled that he had seen the van. On the afternoon of November 28th, Mr. Morgan was returning from the post office when he noticed the van.
And Mr. Morgan stopped because he thought they weren't going to stop for the stop sign and was afraid he'd be hit. At that time, he noticed the white van with this red truck shortly behind it, both speeding through the intersection and driving off. And he thought that was kind of unusual, not only the way they were driving, but the way that the red truck seemed to be following the white van.
I think they were doing...
Mr. Morgan couldn't recall details of license plates or the face of the van's passenger. Desperate for a break, investigators wanted to place him under hypnosis to jog his memory. Morgan agreed to travel to Texas with the investigators. There they met with a forensic hypnotist. Perhaps under hypnosis, the witness could remember more details about the incident. Statements made under hypnosis cannot be used in court, but some police agencies find it to be a helpful investigative tool. Under hypnosis, Morgan returned to the events of November 28th. He recalled the white van and the man in the passenger seat. Investigators now believe there were at least 3 people involved in the heist, 2 in the van and 1 in the red truck. When asked about the truck's license plate, Morgan was able to remember a portion.
237.
Very good.
It wasn't much, but it gave investigators a start.
We had to go to the Department of Motor Vehicles to run all combinations of those license numbers, and that produced several hundred possible vehicles because Arizona does not have color on their motor vehicle registration. So we knew we were looking for a particular type of truck, but from looking at the motor vehicle registrations, we didn't know what color they were on the registration, which meant we had to do interviews of everybody on the list.
Investigators eventually tracked down hundreds of truck owners. Each was interviewed, but no suspect emerged. With his refreshed memory of the van's passenger, Morgan worked with a police sketch artist. There was no guarantee that the details recalled through hypnosis were accurate, but authorities were ready to try almost anything. The FBI released the drawing to the media.
For nearly a month now, police and FBI have continued looking for suspects in the global armored...
The FBI and Glendale, Arizona police believed 3 men were involved in the robbery homicide. Yet, as the end of 1994 approached, they still didn't have suspects. It began to look like the killers might never be found.
Martha, do you have the TV on?
But the investigators did not know that the suspect in the composite sketch had been recognized.
Can you call me back? Call me back in like 10 minutes.
By December of 1994, a month after the deadly hijacking of an armored car in Glendale, Arizona, the investigation had stalled. Investigators believed at least 3 people pulled off the heist. They had a composite sketch of one and little else. Then, on December 31st, the investigators received a call. A Mesa, Arizona detective had been told that a local woman had information about the crime.
Okay, thanks.
A background check showed that the woman had a suspended license. This would make it easy to bring her in for questioning without arousing suspicions. The FBI asked local law enforcement to pick her up on the suspended license charge. The investigators asked the woman if she knew anything about the armored car robbery in Glendale. She claimed that she didn't have any real information, but she knew someone who did.
We talked on the phone just a few days ago.
Could you write it down for us, please?
She told investigators that her friend, Judy Espinoza, had talked to her after the news reports of the robbery.
Looks just like him.
Espinoza suspected that her boyfriend might have been involved.
Are you watching it? Right. Right. They're saying he might be connected with the armored car.
The woman told the investigators where Espinoza worked. The investigators spoke with Espinoza.
Good afternoon, Miss Espinoza.
They asked her about the robbery, reminding her that interfering with a federal investigation was itself a crime. She agreed to answer their questions. She explained that her boyfriend, James Greenham, who went by the nickname Yoda, had asked her what she would do if he held up an armored car and suddenly had a lot of money. She told FBI Special Agent Ron Myers that Greenham sometimes worked as a bounty hunter and was usually broke.
Jim never had a dime, but the day of the robbery, he came home that night, told her he had to kill somebody, and he had plenty of cash on his person. She told us that Jim did his bounty hunting with a guy named Tim Ring, and that she had been over to Tim Ring's house and noticed several new all-terrain vehicles, jet skis, a new motorcycle, and Tim had made a comment about how she'd never know how much money was in that garage.
The information was good, but it was only hearsay. Investigators needed more solid evidence. Espinoza had kept several rolls of coins that Greenham had given her. The wrappers were consistent with those used by merchants on the armored van's route. More than a month after the crime, the investigators finally had names. They looked into the two suspects' backgrounds. FBI Special Agent Stephen Chenoweth was familiar with the name of one of the men. Tim Ring had been used as an informant in other FBI cases.
We had paid him for some information that he had furnished us in the past, and you know, in order for us to get information from informants, you aren't dealing with priests and with you know good people. You're dealing with bad guys out there, and Ring's a bad guy.
And when you're ready, focused, squeeze the trigger.
Tim Ring and James Greenham had worked as prison guards in Phoenix and now worked bounty hunter jobs together.
Front sight or through the crosshairs.
Both had many hours of firearms training.
Any questions? Okay, Joe.
Ring was an expert marksman.
Fire when ready.
Pursuing bounty hunters would be dangerous.
The fact that these suspects had law enforcement training in their background made the case pretty difficult. For one, they would be schooled in surveillance techniques. If they were looking for somebody following them, they'd know what to look for. They'd know what to expect anybody following them to do. So we had to be very cautious when we were following them around.
The FBI and Glendale police began 24-hour ground and air surveillance. They had to be covert.
You know, if they're looking for air surveillance, they're looking up, you know. Well, we're way over here because we can't see anything if we're right up here, you know. So we're way over here, way over here.
The agents wanted to see how the pair earned money and how much they spent.
At the time that we were following Mr. Greenham and Mr. Ring around, neither one was gainfully employed that we could tell. They had no income coming in from any legitimate sources, yet we observed them spending a lot of money.
Ring overhauled his truck and Greenham got a new apartment. Both bought motorcycles. Agents tracked their purchases. It seemed the suspects did not exceed a certain level in order to avoid the attention of the Internal Revenue Service.
Okay.
And they always seemed to be careful whenever they spent their money to stay under the $10,000 limit, knowing that if they spent more than that in cash, the expenditure would be reported by the businesses to the IRS.
Investigators continued tailing Ring and Greenham, building a list of associates. They photographed everyone the suspects met. They still didn't know who the third partner was. Glendale detective Tom Clayton hoped surveillance would spot the three meeting somewhere.
We would watch them go to restaurants where they would meet. We would see them go to strip clubs where they met a couple dancers that they knew.
Everywhere they went, the suspects spent a lot of cash, unaware that investigators were watching. Circumstantial evidence linked them to the robbery and homicide. But the FBI and Glendale police still didn't know exactly what had happened and who else was involved. Somehow, the investigators had to get inside the bounty hunter's shadowy world. As the FBI and Glendale, Arizona police continued to investigate a deadly armored car heist, they got a tip from an associate of their two main suspects. Bounty hunter Michael Sanders said that he had cased armored cars with two other men. He believed those men did the Glendale hit without him. Angry at being cut out of the deal, he decided to talk. He gave FBI Special Agent Ron Myers a lead on the third perpetrator.
Sanders came forward to tell us that he thought that Tim Ring and Jim Greenham were involved in this armored car robbery, and that an ex-Phoenix police officer named Fergie, who worked for a camera shop in the Paradise Valley Mall, might be the third man.
Investigators needed to identify Fergie.
So what we're going to do is
they reviewed their case
set up on
photos.
Tonight, try to take some pictures and get a watch for that guy there too.
Surveillance teams had watched Ring and Greenham meeting with a bearded man who drove a Camaro. The car was registered to William Ferguson. Since Sanders said Fergie was an ex-cop, Glendale detective Tom Clayton checked the personnel records of the Phoenix Police Department.
As we investigated William Ferguson's background, we found he retired at 20 years from the Phoenix Police Department, and his retirement was precipitated by some disciplinary problems.
Investigators began surveillance on Ferguson. They saw that the ex-cop met often with the other suspects and was also spending a lot of cash. Agents believed they had identified the three men responsible for the robbery and murder.
The investigation was affected by the three suspects having law enforcement training because we knew that they were going to cover evidence, and they were also known to have firearms training, which made them dangerous to the surveillance officers.
Detectives and agents needed evidence linking the men to the crime. During surveillance, they began trash pulls, confiscating trash bags from the suspects in the hopes that some clues might surface. FBI technicians examined the trash. In rings, they found several 3x5 index cards. Each card had notes detailing armored car routes. Analysis confirmed the handwriting was Ring's. But investigators needed more. They wanted tapes of the suspects discussing the crime. All three men had keys to James Greenham's apartment. FBI Special Agent Stephen Chenoweth believed they used the apartment as headquarters.
Timothy Ring was married, had a wife, children, and I think the likelihood of discussions occurring in regards to this armored car robbery at his house were somewhat remote. But we felt that they were occurring at Greenham's residence, so that was the impetus for which we decided to go ahead and proceed and place a listening device inside the apartment of Greenham.
Special Agent Myers was part of the team that entered the apartment to place the bug.
When we opened the door to go in, an alarm went off immediately, at which point we shut the door and exited the area. We had to come back at a later time with an expert in alarms. And when we went in the door that time, we learned that it was just a real simple motion detector sitting on top of the refrigerator, and all we had to do was just flip the off switch. It wasn't anything sophisticated at all.
While the team was inside Greenham's apartment, the detective surveilling Tim Ring saw him leave his house. Ring owned a red truck like the one reportedly seen following the van. The detective trailed behind Ring. After a few turns, he realized where the suspect was headed. Agents were still in the apartment. Tim Ring was headed that way. Ring often went to Greenham's place, even when Greenham was out. If he went to the apartment, he would interrupt the planting of the bug.
His license is under suspension. Then run his plate.
The team inside needed more time.
I'll pull him over and hold him until you get her.
The detective called in a uniformed officer to stop Ring for speeding. Anything to delay the suspect.
Good evening, sir. What's the problem?
The officer lectured Ring on the dangers of speeding. Detectives wanted to keep him busy while the team finished at the apartment.
Let's go, gang. They're on their way over. Okay, put everything away. Let's get this thing back.
They made it out just before Ring arrived.
Some notices in the rec center.
Investigators also tapped the home and cellular phones of the two other suspects. To get them talking, Supervisory Special Agent Stephen Chenoweth released false information about the case.
We decided to make a press release talking about the investigation, which we thought when they would hear would certainly generate some telephone conversations and other discussions amongst these three suspects. And it did have its desired effect in that they did talk about the information that we released and how accurate they thought it was and whether or not we were on the right trail and whether or not they thought we were getting close to them.
As the suspects talked, the investigators listened.
We didn't get an actual confession where they said, I did the armored car robbery. What we got were several conversations among themselves about different aspects of the case. They would always listen to the news, follow any printed reports or follow any television stories, and as soon as anything would appear on TV, they'd call each other. And they'd make comments like, well, this isn't the way it happened. You know, they'll never find that license plate.
The evidence against the suspects was building.
Man, you seen Judy lately?
But prosecutors wanted more direct statements about the crime before they ordered arrests. Investigators provoked the suspects one more time. A Glendale detective went to James Greenham's apartment when the suspect was out. On the door, he left his business card with the note, Lead 173. Investigators watched Greenham's response to the card. He knew what the note meant. The authorities considered him a lead. Greenham became distraught. He sped away from his apartment, calling Tim Ring on his cell phone. Agents kept watch from an airplane and listened in on the phone taps.
Yeah, Tim, man, listen.
Greenham drove out into the desert before stopping.
Business card in my door.
Look, man, they ain't got nothing on you. Don't worry about it.
Ring tried to calm Greenham down, promising that the authorities had nothing on them.
Everything's, don't worry about it.
But Greenham said he was scared.
can't do this anymore.
He even threatened to commit suicide. Finally, Ring talked Greenham down, convincing him the authorities were not onto them.
But if I see one more cop,
Greenham said that if another cop contacted him, he was going to bury the money. It seemed a direct reference to the crime.
Sam 40.
Investigators felt they
Contact
finally
unknown
had enough
suspects,
evidence.
Greenway and 6th Avenue. Continuing search northbound.
They sent units to arrest Greenham and Ferguson.
Jim Greenham was arrested by one team. William Ferguson was arrested by another and attempted to resist arrest but was quickly subdued. Tim Ring was lured down to the FBI office on the premise of looking at some photographs because Ring had previously offered to help the FBI try to find who these people were, which we believe was an effort on his part to try and find out what we knew.
The FBI agent who had previously used Ring as an informant called the suspect. Ring agreed to come in. On February 16, 1995, Tim Ring arrived at the Phoenix FBI field office. Undercover agents were waiting for him in the lobby. They believed he would not be armed at the FBI office, but they couldn't be positive. To ensure their safety, they needed to surprise him.
We had two big burly defensive tactics instructors, one of which was a guy with 25 years of martial arts expertise who came up and whopped him in the head and knocked him down like a sack of potatoes before he knew what he was doing.
All three suspects were off the streets. Now investigators needed physical evidence to make sure the prosecutions were successful. On February 16, 1995, after arresting 3 men for an armored car robbery and murder, FBI agents and Glendale, Arizona detectives searched the suspects' residences. At the house of Tim Ring, suspected leader of the 3, they found important evidence. Investigators recovered a note marked with the initials F, Y, and T. Each initial had a number beneath.
Like serial numbers from the
The numbers added up to the amount of cash taken from the armored car. Agents believed F stood for Fergie, Y for Greenham's nickname Yoda, and T for Tim. It was the worksheet the 3 used to divide the money. In the garage, investigators found a red pickup truck that resembled the vehicle seen by witness Edward Morgan in Sun City. The license plate number, however, did not match the ones Morgan recalled under forensic hypnosis. Ring kept several weapons and plenty of ammunition at his house. In a duffel bag, agents also recovered $270,000 in cash. Another $64,000 was found at Ferguson's house.
We need to count all of it.
Nearly $600,000 in cash had been stolen. Noting the money spent by the suspects, investigators found that about $100,000 was unaccounted for. The case against the 3 suspects seemed solid. FBI Special Agent Ron Myers hoped the evidence might get one of them to roll.
We finally got first-hand information about this crime when Jim Greenham decided to cooperate. Jim Greenham was the only one of the 3 of them that showed any remorse about what they had done, about how they had killed this driver. Jim decided to cooperate. He told us what happened. He told us all the parts that these individuals played in the robbery.
Greenham met with the investigators and explained that the planning started in the fall of 1994.
Ferguson and I just watched when
Tim Ring had the idea to hit an armored car.
I wasn't crazy about the fact that he was going to kill him.
What were you planning on
So they
doing?
began to case Wells Fargo vehicles. They drove around Glendale, following different trucks and vans on their routes.
Where are you supposed to be again?
Then they zeroed in on the van driven by John McGosh, tailing it for days.
They managed to observe this one particular armored car making several stops, and they noticed that every time the messenger would get out to make a delivery, the driver would open the door about 8 inches to smoke and blow the smoke out the side of the door. They observed the driver at several stops, and they noticed this one particular stop on the back side of a shopping center and noticed that he always parked in the same position.
On November 28, 1994, the Monday after Thanksgiving, a day they were sure a lot of money would be in the van, they were ready to strike. James Greenham and William Ferguson waited unnoticed by the store. They watched until the courier was out of sight. As if on schedule, McGosh opened the door to smoke. Tim Ring was parked 50 feet away, a stolen license plate on his truck. The expert marksman had a silencer on his .22 caliber rifle, so no one would hear the shot. He aimed through the opening and fired once. The force must have knocked McGosh's glasses to the ground. With the driver down, the van was unprotected. No one noticed the vehicle speed away. They drove to the church parking lot. It would be empty at that time of day. They transferred the money and checks to the pickup. They knew authorities would be searching for the van. They left most of the coins and went to destroy the checks and other evidence, according to Detective Tom Clayton.
They loaded the money into Tim Ring's truck and drove out in the desert where they separated the money, changed clothes, and burned all the evidence.
Buried the license plate.
Greenham said they buried the burned evidence and stolen license plate in the desert.
And you can take us to where the plates are buried?
Yeah.
Special Agent Stephen Chenoweth wondered if it was the plate witnessed by Edward Morgan.
We went out there and actually found the location and then dug it up and found that the 3 numbers actually on the plate did in fact match those that were given to us by Mr. Morgan. So he was actually right on his information.
James Greenham pled guilty to second-degree murder and armed robbery and is serving 27.5 years. William Ferguson pled guilty to armed robbery and accessory after the fact and is doing 17 years. On December 6, 1996, Tim Ring was found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and burglary.
Anytime that you have somebody actually assassinate a driver like this, it's a very heinous crime, and you certainly want to expend all of your resources in an effort to identify the people involved and put them behind bars.
For his crimes, Ring received the death penalty. He currently awaits execution at the Arizona State Prison in Florence.
Just do it. Just do it. All right, hands up. Hands up. Get that money up. Come on.
A series of crimes in a small farming community left people reeling in shock and fear. As the hunt for the suspects expanded, they turned to the FBI for help. They traveled over 1,000 miles to find the deadly perpetrators before more innocent victims crossed their path.
In June of 1997, a crime wave swept Iowa like a tornado. It left a trail of robbery, kidnapping, and murder in its wake. And then it moved on. No one knew where. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The FBI committed its resources to tracking down the suspects. By the time they were identified, they already had a 12-hour lead. The pursuit would take the FBI across 6 states in their efforts to catch the killers.
June 11th, 1997, south central Iowa. The farming region, rich with crops and livestock, began to stir as dawn became morning. Most farmhands had arrived hours earlier to begin their chores. But one who never missed a shift without calling had failed to show that day. Her boss, a nearby farmer, became worried when he called and got no answer. Since she lived alone, he went to check on her. He noticed her pickup truck wasn't there, and the front door was ajar. Inside, he found the lifeless body of his farmhand, Barbara Garber.
Barbara.
Mahaska County Sheriff's Chief Deputy Paul DeGeest responded to the 911 alert.
In 20 years of law enforcement, I've been involved with about 5 or 6 homicides. So it's not something that happens a whole lot in Oskaloosa, Iowa, or Mahaska County. When we went into the living room, we observed Barb Garber's body. She was sitting upright, fully clothed in a chair. She was leaning over to the left side, and there was blood coming from her head.
The sheriff called specialists from the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation to process the scene. The middle-aged woman had been shot 4 times at close range while she sat in the chair. Technicians recovered .22 caliber shell casings close to the victim. At her feet, they found her half-eaten breakfast. The absence of defensive wounds on the body indicated the farmhand had put up no struggle, according to Iowa Special Agent Michael Barrier.
The house did not appear to have any forced entry. It looked like someone had just entered the house, either been let in or had gotten in without having to break in. The residence had a lived-in look but was not ransacked, and there was nothing obviously taken from the residence other than her vehicle was missing from the driveway.
Green pickup truck.
The farmer described the victim's vehicle as a late-model dark green pickup truck.
And that was her personal truck? Yes.
Detectives issued a be on the lookout for the missing truck to all law enforcement in the area.
Vehicle, a station wagon.
As you were coming down this road?
Yeah, coming along this road here.
Investigators spoke to her closest neighbor, who lived a quarter-mile down the road. She had noticed something earlier that day when she was on her way to work in the pre-dawn hours.
All the way down there.
She saw an unfamiliar blue hatchback or station wagon backing out of Mrs. Garber's driveway. But she didn't see who was inside, and she didn't get the license plate.
This vehicle was described as a older, not in very good shape, station wagon type vehicle, blue in color. The vehicle was not a vehicle that had been seen at the Garber residence before and was not really associated with the Garber residence, and so we felt that it may be and probably was a suspect vehicle.
As police were talking to the neighbor, an alert came across the police radio.
What you got? Okay, I'll be en route.
A bank 5 miles away in the hamlet of Gibson had just been robbed. Deputies from 2 counties responded. Because deposits are insured by the federal government, the FBI was called in.
Yes.
The closest field office was 77 miles away in Cedar Rapids.
2 males, armed. Okay. All right, we'll be heading right there. Larry, we got a bank robbery in Gibson. Okay. All right.
FBI Special Agent Scott French was assigned the
2
case.
males. What are they armed with? All right, bye.
The small savings bank in Gibson had just opened for business for the first time that day to the town's population of 70.
Down south here. Right there.
It has one paved road to the community of Gibson. The rest of the area is surrounded by farmland with a few gravel roads leading away from the community.
It would take Agent French over an hour to get there. Sheriff's deputies arrived first to secure the crime scene and take witness statements. Bank employees told investigators that the robbery had occurred at about 10 a.m.
Right.
They had no customers at the time, and there was no guard on duty. Only a teller and the manager were inside when the robbery took place.
All right, get your hands up! Hands
Two
up!
armed robbers wearing dark ski masks, gloves, and brown coveralls burst into the bank. One held a shotgun while the other carried a handgun.
Pick that money up, come on.
The robbers scooped stacks of cash and banknotes into plastic trash bags.
Come on, hurry up! Let's go! No, up against the wall, now! Go!
They had gotten away with $65,000 in cash.
Moving!
Though they wore masks, bank employees believed both men were white males.
The Gibson Savings Bank did not have any security system. That is, no video cameras, no film to have recorded the robbery. This makes it difficult for investigators to have some evidence other than witness statements.
Investigators found only one person who had seen anything, a 10-year-old girl.
If you had to guess, what kind of car would you say it is?
She told agents that she'd been riding her bike across the street when the robbery occurred. Two men in ski masks holding bags had jumped out of a gray car and had run into the bank. She rode away before the men came out. The girl was either too young or too scared to get the license plate. Police put out an all-points bulletin alerting units to be on the lookout for a gray sedan as a possible getaway vehicle.
I felt the robbers in this particular case were from the immediate area. First of all, the Gibson Bank is a very isolated location. Second of all, both individuals were wearing coveralls, which are somewhat indigenous to the working people in these communities.
Car 32, car 32.
Uniform
10-4, I got it.
The deputy on his way to the robbery scene headed for likely routes the bandits would have used to escape.
Central, I'm going to check this out. We have a car matching the description.
2.5 miles from the bank, he noticed a gray sedan, apparently abandoned in the middle of a farm field. No one was in sight. He checked the car and radioed in the license plate number. It was registered to a teenager by the name of Island Schultz, who lived nearby.
He thought it was extremely unusual that this vehicle would be sitting where it was. And knowing that they were only just a couple of miles away, he drove to their house.
Iowa communities are tight-knit, and the officer happened to know the Schultz family. At the teenager's home, he got no response. The deputy found the front door unlocked.
Island?
Inside, he discovered 18-year-old Island Schultz lying on the floor, shot to death. He radioed for assistance. Mahaska County Chief Deputy Paul DeGeest felt strongly that this second homicide was likely related to both the first murder and the bank heist.
We're relatively sure in our own minds that these were all connected. They were in a 5-mile radius of each other. And again, that's just not something you see a lot of in rural Iowa, where you would have 2 bodies and a bank robbery all within a matter of 2 hours.
The recent high school graduate had been shot twice in the head from close range. An audio cassette and 2 .22 caliber shell casings, the same caliber found at the first murder scene, were recovered close to her body. Like the earlier homicide, investigators found no indication of forced entry and no defensive wounds on the young girl. Iowa Special Agent Michael Barrier discovered another important connection to the first murder victim, Barb Garber.
A neighborhood canvass in the area of the Schultz residence gave us information that a green pickup truck, newer, in good shape, was seen parked in the Schultz driveway at about 9:30 a.m. that morning. That's interesting to us because Barb Garber's pickup is a newer, dark green Dodge pickup truck. And so we believe that after her truck was stolen from her residence, that it ended up at the Schultz residence. And that tied the 2 homicides together.
Both bodies were sent to the county medical examiner for autopsy. Analysis of the bullets confirmed what investigators had suspected. Each victim had been killed with the same weapon, a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol. The FBI and local investigators assembled a command center in the Mahaska County Sheriff's Office. They set up a hotline and contacted the media with a description of the farmhand's late model dark green pickup truck.
We occupied a large debriefing room, which acted as a command post. We began to collate leads that were coming in from all parts of the community. There was also significant media attention at this point, which increased the volume of phone calls that were coming in.
Deputies chased down dozens of leads. One was from a teenager who had seen a green truck that fit the description of the farmhand's pickup. He was in the town of Oskaloosa in the late morning when he noticed the truck drive past with 2 men inside. The witness didn't see their faces and he didn't get the license plate. It wasn't much to go on since that particular truck was so common in the area.
We received dozens upon dozens of sightings, most of which turned out to be absolutely nothing. It was just a green 1997 pickup. And everybody that was driving one at some point in time that day in the Mahaska County area was stopped.
Everyone except the driver of the murder victim's truck. Investigators fanned out to search the various small towns in Mahaska County for more promising witnesses. They found one who said he noticed something at around 10:30 or 11 on the morning of the crime spree. He saw a dark green pickup truck near the town of Oskaloosa. The witness identified the driver as a local man whom he'd never seen in that truck before. He claimed there was a passenger inside, but the truck pulled away before he could see who it was.
The individual who reported it recognized the driver of that truck as being Jamie McMahon, a person that he knew, and knew well enough to have recognized him and was positive that it was Jamie McMahon. He also said that there was a second individual in the truck, but he could not get a close enough look to tell whether it was even a man or a woman, just that there was a second person in the truck.
Hey guys, what I want to do is, Don, I want you to take background on Jamie.
At the end of the first day, investigators now had the name and face of a possible suspect in the 2 killings and bank robbery. 22-year-old local Jamie McMahon. Agents and detectives hoped they could catch up with him and his unidentified accomplice before any more lives were lost. On June 12, 1997, the day after 2 Iowa residents were killed and a bank was robbed, the FBI and local authorities had the name of a possible suspect, 22-year-old Jamie McMahon. McMahon was last seen driving a green pickup that fit the description of the missing vehicle owned by one of the murdered women. Investigators believe that an unidentified passenger traveling with him may be an accomplice. Special Agent Michael Barrier of the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation learned that Jamie McMahon's last known address was at his parents' home in Oskaloosa, Iowa. His parents were concerned to hear from Agent Barrier because they hadn't seen their son since the crimes had occurred.
When we spoke to friends and family about Jamie McMahon, we found that he had been a good kid, hard worker, but that in the past few months prior to these crimes, his personality had changed somewhat, that he began to lose weight, that he had stopped working, and that it just appeared that he was having problems.
You mind if I ask
Investigators arrived at McMahon's home to search the house and find out more from his parents.
This won't take long. We provide help.
Over the past several weeks, McMahon had been spending a lot of time with his 18-year-old stepbrother, Christopher Kaufman. Kaufman lived close by, but the two had different sets of friends and normally didn't see each other much. Lately, they'd been inseparable. Now, both were missing.
These are good.
Because the bank had been robbed by 2 individuals, and because the witness had seen McMahon driving a truck with a second individual, we just had to assume that Chris Kaufman was the second person with Jamie McMahon.
Detectives interviewed McMahon's friends who remembered seeing him with Christopher Kaufman late on the night before the crimes, driving an old blue station wagon. One friend had lent McMahon the car for the past few months, since the suspect couldn't afford one, according to Mahaska County Sheriff's Chief Deputy Paul DeGeest.
This vehicle was a blue station wagon, which would appear to be a hatchback type vehicle if you just drove past the back of it. This would also tie in with the vehicle that the neighbor seen in Barb Garber's driveway earlier that morning.
Investigators searched the car, but found no evidence that physically connected McMahon or Kaufman to Barbara Garber's murder.
Any unusual behavior?
McMahon's friends mentioned that he had always wanted a dark green pickup like the victims, but the sticker price was out of his range.
Jamie had an infatuation with this particular type of vehicle. Earlier that year, he had one on order that fit the same as what Barb Garber's was and did not have the money to pay for it, so he canceled the order.
His friends added that the day before the murder, McMahon had stopped by with Kaufman to borrow something else. A .22 caliber semi-automatic handgun that he claimed he was going to use to shoot stray cats. The same type of gun was used in both murders.
Card.
Investigators asked his friends to call immediately if the suspect contacted them for any reason. Authorities learned from several other friends that the suspected murderer had recently been abusing the drug methamphetamine. FBI Special Agent Scott French was concerned about McMahon's mental state, since the illegal drug is an addictive stimulant.
Abusers of methamphetamine suffer a variety of side effects, one of which is they can be awake for several days. Second is they have loss of appetite. But of a greater concern to law enforcement is they have significantly clouded judgment. They become increasingly paranoid, and they may be easily agitated.
a widespread manhunt was launched for the stepbrothers in the dark green pickup truck that was still missing.
5:30, the neighborhood canvas revealed that a small blue car was seen at the Garber residence.
Agents and police also notified additional law enforcement agencies and media outlets throughout the Midwest. Warrants for murder and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution were issued for McMahon and Kaufman.
Initially, we felt that they had left the state, and we could only speculate as to where. Most of investigators there felt very strongly that they were probably headed for Mexico.
Investigators revisited the homes of the pair's friends and family, figuring they would try to contact them.
We're going to put a recording device into the phone.
McMahon's ex-girlfriend gave the FBI permission to install a phone tap and recorder.
Did he? Okay. Figure out where he's at and what's
If
going on.
McMahon called,
Okay.
agents would be ready to trace his location. As the manhunt for McMahon and Kaufman continued, a call came into the task force office. Two sets of local parents reported that their teenage daughters were missing. The high school girls, 16 and 17, had not been home since the previous evening. They were best friends and were always together. With two killers on the loose, the parents feared for the girls' lives. Investigators discovered that McMahon and Kaufman had been partying with several girls at a motel in Oskaloosa the night before the crime spree.
Okay, thanks.
At the motel, a clerk told investigators the girls had stayed overnight and were still in the room on the morning of the crimes.
Yeah, those are the girls. Those are the girls, yeah. Those are the ones.
The employee saw McMahon and Kaufman with a green truck later on that same day. She said the two girls left with the stepbrothers.
Yeah.
Investigators issued another nationwide bulletin that the fugitives McMahon and Kaufman were last seen in Iowa traveling with two teenage girls.
We were concerned for the safety of the girls. I believed at the time that if Jamie McMahon was willing to kill someone he knew, that the girls may be in danger.
Investigators responded to a promising tip that came into the hotline. McMahon and Kaufman had been spotted at a trailer several miles away from their family home. Investigators had no way of knowing if they were still armed, high on methamphetamine, or if the teenage girls were still with them.
Not wanting to take any chances and not knowing their mental state, we had the FBI SWAT team come in. Basically, we surrounded the cabin and came in from several different directions.
Heavily armed agents hoped for the best, but were prepared for the worst. Officers yelled for McMahon and Kaufman to come out. There was no reply. The police team stormed in, ready to use deadly force. In June of 1997, the FBI and Iowa investigators stormed a trailer in a remote field on the second day of a nationwide manhunt for 22-year-old Jamie McMahon and his 18-year-old stepbrother, Chris Kaufman. The pair were suspected in 2 murders and robbing $65,000 from a bank. 2 missing teenage girls were believed to be with them.
Clear down. Looking back here.
Investigators found no trace of the fugitives or the girls. Sightings of the stepbrothers in the stolen green pickup were reported from as far south as Texas to as far north as Minnesota. With $65,000 in cash and a 12-hour lead, Iowa Special Agent Michael Beria realized the pair could be anywhere by now.
We were unable to really come up with any place that they may go. We had information that they might have gone to Minnesota. We also had information that they may have friends or relatives in Florida. But we didn't really have any solid direction of travel where they went.
After 7 days of searching, the FBI got the call they'd been hoping for.
Yeah, they're looking all over the place for you.
Agents were ready with a phone tap when Jamie McMahon called his ex-girlfriend. During the call, McMahon asked if authorities had any idea who killed Mrs. Garber and Island Schultz.
He was fishing for information. He was trying to see what we knew and whether we even knew that they were suspects in the case. And she just told him, you know, what did you do and why are they looking for you? And he became aware quite quickly that he was a suspect and that we did know that they were involved. And he hung up.
The agent called his supervisor at the Mahaska County Command Center. FBI Special Agent Scott French learned McMahon had been on the phone long enough to trace his call.
After we received the phone call from McMahon, I began the process of trying to track down the number from where he called. At some point, we reached a snag with a phone company outside the area, wherein they could not determine or provide the number until the following day.
Agents learned that the suspected killer had called from a hotel in Kissimmee, Florida. The employee recognized photos of the two fugitives and confirmed the two teenage girls were with them.
Are they in this hotel? Are they registered here? Are they in the hotel at this time? Please check. No, they checked out.
But they had all just left.
When did they leave?
What's up? The phone company's delay had given McMahon and Kaufman just enough time to stay ahead of law enforcement.
McMahon and Kaufman are gone. We missed them.
So they know we're looking for them now.
They know we're looking for them.
Good.
Agents were concerned that McMahon and Kaufman would be more difficult to find now, since they knew the FBI were on their trail.
All right, well, thanks, and I'll get back on this.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Though authorities had missed McMahon and Kaufman in Florida, the two teenage girls who had been traveling with the fugitives returned home safely to their parents.
Parents, take a seat, get some coffee.
Investigators questioned the girls about the time they spent with McMahon and Kaufman. The teenagers confirmed that they had stayed with the young men at the Oskaloosa Motel on the night prior to the crimes. The next morning, McMahon and Kaufman came by in a green pickup with a lot of cash. McMahon, the eldest of the group at 22, offered them a free trip to Florida. The impressionable teenage girls agreed to go with the stepbrothers and didn't ask a lot of questions.
The girls told us that they weren't aware that there'd been a homicide, and they weren't really aware that there'd been a bank robbery as such, but they were aware that something had happened to allow McMahon and Kaufman to have so much money.
The girls told investigators that on their way out of town, they stopped by the Des Moines River. One of the stepbrothers threw a duffel bag into the water, but he never told them what was inside. After that, the four of them drove south toward Florida.
For the first week of this trip with McMahon and Kaufman, the girls treated it like it was a vacation. They were having a good time. They were eating out. They were going to amusement parks.
One of their first stops was in Branson, Missouri. There, the four entertained themselves on carnival rides. The girls said they took photos along the way.
They had with them a couple of Instamatic cameras, and we took those cameras and had the film developed, and we had photographs of McMahon and Kaufman, and one picture in particular is of Chris Kaufman sitting in Barb Garber's pickup truck.
After their trip to Disney World, the girls said that McMahon and Kaufman finally confessed to them about the murders and the bank robbery. Kaufman had dyed his hair blonde to disguise himself. High on methamphetamine, The armed men also told the girls they wouldn't mind killing them as well.
I don't want to go with
The girls were frightened and told the fugitives they wanted to return home.
please. I want to go home.
All right, look, here.
McMahon gave them money for a taxi and train
Should
fare
be
back
enough
to
here to get y'all
Iowa.
back home.
They told investigators they had no idea where the stepbrothers were headed.
Well, they didn't say where they were going. They just gave us money and we left.
Investigators concluded the girls were not involved since they remained at the Oskaloosa Motel when the crimes had occurred. They released the teenagers into their parents' custody without filing charges. On the Des Moines River, an off-duty Iowa trooper happened to come across a bag in the water. He opened it to find a pair of black ski masks and brown coveralls. The officer also found a wallet with a driver's license. He contacted police and gave them the evidence. The wallet and driver's license belonged to the murdered Island Schultz. The clothing matched what the robbers were wearing when they made off with $65,000 in cash from an Iowa bank. Jamie McMahon and Christopher Kaufman remained the prime suspects, and they were still out there, armed and strung out. On June 30th, 1997, 19 days after the search for McMahon and Kaufman began, a call came into the Escambia County Sheriff's Department in Florida. A motorist in Pensacola wanted to talk to police.
Everybody involved in this that you can, okay?
He told them he was driving on a nearby highway when he noticed a green pickup. The night before, he had seen a story about the manhunt for McMahon and Kaufman on television. The truck seemed to fit the description of the fugitive's vehicle. The motorist pulled alongside to get a closer look. He thought the driver looked exactly like the man featured on the show. The truck also had Iowa tags. The motorist pulled off and phoned police.
South, east, and west of the
The
area.
Escambia County Sheriff's Department realized the motorist's description of the truck matched the one Iowa authorities were looking for.
Compass and compass out there.
Iowa authorities wanted to be sure this wasn't just another false lead.
Yeah, I've had dealings with them in the past.
It seemed promising since the suspected murderers were last seen in Florida.
You got on him?
They confirmed the license number and sent photos of the stepbrothers to the sheriffs in Pensacola.
That's the same guy I'm thinking of.
Iowa investigators alerted them to use caution since the fugitive pair were considered armed and dangerous.
Now pick up something and come back over here. You set up roadblocks around Pensacola and all surrounding counties.
An urgent be on the lookout was issued for the green truck in the Pensacola area. Deputies searched local roads, shopping centers, and motel parking lots for any sign of the fugitives or the stolen green pickup truck. In the parking lot of a local motel, 2 officers spotted a green pickup truck. Motel residents usually park close to their room entrance, but this vehicle was obscured near the back behind a fence. Its Iowa license plate and description checked out. It was the murder victim's stolen truck from Iowa. Authorities had no time to lose if they hoped to bring in the fugitives before they eluded them once again. At a Pensacola, Florida motel, authorities had finally located the stolen pickup truck driven by Jamie McMahon and Christopher Kaufman, stepbrothers suspected of 2 murders and a bank robbery in Iowa. Escambia County deputies needed to confirm if the armed fugitives were staying there.
I didn't know if you'd seen these gentlemen today, people, man.
Yes.
The motel clerk recognized the photos of McMahon and Kaufman, but she added that there was a 3rd man in their room. She gave deputies the room number.
Possibly a hostage situation.
Police told her the motel had to be evacuated.
Yes, no problem.
Okay, I'll go with you.
Fearing that the stepbrothers had possibly taken a hostage, deputies called in a hostage negotiating team.
We know they've killed 2 already.
Escambia County Sheriff Sergeant Jerry Cox was in charge.
We want to establish a command post in this area. That's where we're going. We knew they were armed. We knew that they were murder suspects. We knew they were bank robbers. They were seriously violent criminal individuals. So we got the call out. Our SWAT team and crisis negotiators got the call out, and we responded to the motel.
The motel was evacuated. The hostage negotiating team set up an emergency center nearby. SWAT teams took up positions near McMahon and Kaufman's room. Snipers set up on a nearby roof. No one knew the situation with the third man or his relationship with the stepbrothers. They had no way of knowing if they were all still inside. The negotiator secured the line and attempted to get them on the phone.
Okay, we got the line.
From the man's tone of voice, the negotiator believed he was likely a hostage.
When I made contact with the room, the first individual that I talked to was the hostage himself. He gave me a false name, and I began to try to talk to him a little bit, knowing that was not the correct name, of course, and try to find out what his situation was, what his physical condition was, and what the situation was in the room.
The man said he had just met the fugitives hitchhiking and stayed with them to party for a while. The stepbrothers had been awake for almost 4 days, high on meth, and now they were finally crashing.
There's no way. They'll shoot.
The man had since become aware they were murder suspects and that they were still armed.
In and out of sleep, wiped out.
He was absolutely frightened out of his mind. He did not know what to do, and he knew that they were willing to take life. They had made statements to him that they would not be taken alive, and therefore he was afraid to make any moves because of what they might do to him.
Bobby?
The negotiator tried to convince him to leave the room,
There's 2 other guys.
that the rescue team would be at the door when he emerged. While the man considered what to do, McMahon woke up.
Meth all night. Well, yeah, one of them's getting up. But it's the cops, man. You guys gotta let me out of here. What?
One of my major concerns was the fact that they were known drug users and had been partying for a number of days. When people are under the influence of drugs or alcohol, when it comes to negotiations, one of the things you have to be aware of is how those chemicals can alter a person's personality and alter their reactions. They might be extremely aggressive.
Due to their 3-week drug binge, it became clear to the negotiator that the fugitives were not thinking clearly, if at all.
Talking to the cops for? Calm down, man. Whoa, calm down. Here.
His first concern was to get the third man out safely without more bloodshed. Authorities were all too aware that the situation could turn violent quickly.
Paramount in my mind was the fact that if they killed 2 already, and both those murders, based on my information, were cold-blooded, calculated murders with no thought given whatsoever to the consequences, that they could easily do that again.
Hold on. Let's shoot everybody. Calm down. Just sit down. Calm down, man. Just hold on. No, man. Put that away. Put that away, man.
Who is this?
Chill. Calm down, man. Just hold on.
Sharpshooters stood at the ready. The negotiator tried to convince them to let the man out of the room before someone else was killed.
Shouldn't have done that, man.
What, man? What do you want? He's not us.
There's no. I'm out. No way, man.
You just gonna walk out?
There's no way. All right, fine. You don't mean that crap to us.
Let the hostage go.
Man, Chris, let him go, man.
After 2 hours, the armed men finally allowed him to leave unharmed.
hands. Put your hands on top of your head. Come towards me. Come towards me. Come towards me.
SWAT members spirited the hostage out of the line of fire to where the negotiators continued to work. The hostage said he met the fugitives in New Orleans and had been with them for several days. He said they had a lot of drugs and a lot of cash in the room. They only had one handgun as far as he knew. With 2 armed fugitives still barricaded in the motel room, a peaceful resolution did not seem likely. In June of 1997, hostage negotiators and a SWAT team surrounded a Pensacola, Florida motel where 2 armed fugitives wanted for 2 murders and a bank heist in Iowa remained barricaded inside their room, strung out on drugs. Escambia County Sheriff Sergeant Jerry Cox was the lead negotiator.
The most difficult segment of the negotiations for me was to try to overcome the emotional state that they were in as a result of their drug use, their prolonged activity of being awake for so long, and to try to direct them in a peaceful resolution.
He spoke to 18-year-old Christopher Kaufman for some time.
This is Chris. We're gonna kill everybody.
The young fugitive was aware that he was surrounded by police. Sergeant Cox tried to convince him to do the sensible thing and come out unarmed.
But one of the things I was able to learn from Kaufman was that he was tired, that he was just too physically and mentally exhausted to be making an awful lot of decisions.
Worn out, Kaufman passed the phone to his 22-year-old stepbrother, Jamie McMahon.
Hello? What?
The negotiator noticed that McMahon seemed more lucid, more mature than his younger brother. He used it as a hook to separate the two.
So I told him, I said, it's obvious to me that you're the one who's running the show in there. I need you to take charge and do something for me. And he said, what is that? And I said, well, what I need you to do is I need you to take care of your brother. I need you to get him out of there.
Look, just go.
The strategy worked.
Man, just go. I started this. Let me finish.
Movement, red one, white male.
Chris, man, I just want you to go.
McMahon didn't want his brother to suffer
No,
whatever
look at me, man. You
consequences
just gotta
McMahon
go.
was going to face by staying in the room.
Go.
SWAT members secured Christopher Kaufman. Now, only his stepbrother remained. McMahon teetered between indecision and despair. He knew his options were limited. The 22-year-old began to weigh life in prison versus suicide.
I heard what was sounded to me like a weapon being charged. It was an automatic pistol that he had in there, so it sounded like somebody had slid the slide back and ejected a shell into the chamber, arming the weapon for firing. Gave me some concern. I passed that information on to our commanders and our SWAT team.
McMahon's judgment was clouded.
You there?
He didn't want to spend the rest of his life behind bars.
No, man.
Confused and desperate, he looked to the negotiator for guidance.
And the thing that seemed to work the most was constantly reminding him that as long as he was alive, he had some hope. He had a chance. Once he was dead, there was no chance. And that in Iowa, there was no death penalty. He had an awful lot of years ahead of him to figure this out.
McMahon relented to the negotiator's insight. 4 hours after it had begun, the last fugitive walked out of the room, unarmed as instructed. The negotiator was able to defuse the situation without death or injury. Agents secured and searched the motel room. They recovered $29,000 in cash of the $65,000 that was stolen. They also found the .22 semi-automatic handgun. On every table rested empty beer bottles, marijuana, and powdered methamphetamine. Ballistics tests later confirmed that .22 was the weapon used to kill the 2 women in Iowa. Authorities questioned the pair separately.
I understand from your brother that you committed both of the murders.
No. One of them.
Kaufman told investigators it was his stepbrother's idea to rob the bank. To pull off the heist, they needed a car. McMahon already had his eye on the first victim's pickup truck, the truck he initially wanted to use as the getaway vehicle.
I think I may have left it at a different friend's house. You mind if I use your phone real quick?
Mrs. Garber knew McMahon and allowed the brothers into her house.
Man, just put the phone right back down, please. Yeah, please.
Look, I've got money in the house. You don't
Shut up,
need
man.
to, you
Just
don't
sit
need
down
to.
right there.
Just sit down.
Just sit down!
You don't
Once
need to.
inside,
Just do
Kaufman
it.
claimed his stepbrother egged him on to kill her.
Just do it! All right, do it!
He wanted Mrs. Garber dead so she wouldn't report the vehicle missing. Kaufman said he shot Barbara Garber twice, then again to make sure she was dead. Since McMahon loved her truck so much, he wanted to keep it and steal a different vehicle to use in the robbery. McMahon decided to try another friend of his, Eileen Schultz.
Hey. You're my brother Chris, right? Hey, we're completely out of gas, so can we borrow some money?
Sure, no problem. Come on in. You got some.
Like Mrs. Garber, their second victim let McMahon in along with Kaufman.
Little road
The
trip
pair
or
claimed they
something?
needed money for gas.
Yeah, I think I
She
have
lent them
some.
$5.
Is that
That's
enough
fine.
now?
For now. Yeah, yeah.
As she bent over to put a music tape on,
Hey, I got a
Kaufman
pretty
told
cool
investigators
Wanna take a look?
his stepbrother shot her in the back of the head. To make sure she was dead, McMahon shot her again between the eyes. The stepbrothers took Schultz's car keys and wallet. Over the next 3 weeks, the pair spent $36,000 on hotels, prostitutes, and drugs before they were apprehended in Pensacola, Florida. Though Iowa had no death penalty, Jamie McMahon, 22, and Christopher Kaufman, 18, faced the federal death penalty for 2 carjackings resulting in death. They faced another federal charge for bank robbery. To avoid a death sentence, the stepbrothers pled guilty to all federal and state charges. Their convictions left many unanswered questions for the people of Iowa and Mahaska County Chief Deputy Paul DeGeest.
These two guys were as common as any two boys next door. I can't explain why they would go to this extent to get a vehicle and to go on vacation or just to impress a couple of girls. It's just crazy. You'd never guess that they would be the two type of individuals to do that, knowing their parents, knowing their backgrounds. I mean, it just didn't make sense.
Jamie McMahon serves the rest of his life in Leavenworth, Kansas. Christopher Kaufman serves his time in solitary confinement in the tough Supermax federal prison in Florence, Colorado.